I want to thank everybody for organizing this webinar tonight and for inviting me. And my opening remarks will be in two parts. So first, I'll discuss the main tenets of the political discourse of the Green New Deal. And then I'll delve into some proposals for radicalizing the Green New Deal and turn it into a transitional strategy towards a post-growth economy. But I'll start off by saying that while over the past couple of years, the Green New Deal banner has been appropriated by so many different movements and political parties that it is difficult to agree on what it actually stands for, in its most radical articulations, the Green New Deal represents, in my opinion, the most promising political discourse for a socio-ecological transformation of our societies. The Green New Deal transcends a series of false choices imposed upon earlier climate justice movements. For instance, the Green New Deal rejects the jobs versus environment trade-off that has been used to successfully wedge environmental and workers' movements for almost half a century. It does so by putting the emphasis on the creation of green jobs in the private sector that are labor-intensive and not easy to delocalize and automate. Furthermore, one key policy proposal of the Green New Deal is a job guarantee, which gives public authorities the duty to fund the employment of anybody who wants a job but cannot find one in the private labor market. And employment created through a job guarantee should be focused on those activities that, while generating little profit, yield social value by improving resilience for ecosystems and communities. Secondly, the Green New Deal shifts the emphasis away from individual action to change consumption through self-discipline, and it shifts the conversation to how we can collectively provide for people's needs in the most ecological, sustainable way. We could define this an attempt at articulating a climate politics for the working class. To decarbonize the way we move, the way we eat, how we supply energy and heating to our homes, we should remove basic services from the market logic and subject them to the logic of the commons. And one important reason why decommodification and decarbonization should proceed in lockstep is because the consumption of public services has a lower environmental impact than their private equivalents. But even more crucial than that, reducing dependence on individual consumer goods mitigates competition for social status and consequently does a lot to counteract consumerism. Thirdly, the Green New Deal offers an alternative to market-based climate mechanisms and to the dependence on private investments for the energy transition. In doing so, the Green New Deal prescribes the need for an active role of the state in the economy. This means fully deploying the power of public investment and coordination in a historic break from the neoliberal playbook. After all, clean energy and the low carbon infrastructure necessary to provide it is a public good. Treating the climate crisis as a public infrastructure challenge rather than a private market failure brings a range of advantages that pricing and regulation cannot provide. Firstly, it enables long time horizons that private investors are unlikely to tolerate. Secondly, it enables planning and coordination across sectors of the economy to integrate infrastructure and institutions. And lastly, it enables low-cost public finance that could make the price of the energy transition far more manageable. These, let's say, are all the promises that the Green New Deal holds for us. But given the overwhelming empirical evidence against the green growth assumption that it is possible to decouple economic growth from environmental impacts, it's clear that a truly transformative Green New Deal cannot simply be about returning to a welfare capitalist order of the post-war economic boom. Building solar panels and wind turbines is a transitional strategy that might lead to the growth of certain economic sectors for a limited amount of time, but continuous growth should not be the objective of the Green New Deal. The Green New Deal should, therefore, be a transitional strategy towards a post-growth economy. But what would such an economy look like? In the second part of my opening remarks, I'll discuss now 4 of its essential attributes. So first of all, we should shift our focus from creating new employment to redistributing available employment. Indeed, productivity increases entail that less human labor is needed to produce the same amount of goods and services each year. As long as the economy grows fast enough to offset increases in labor productivity, there is no problem. But if the economy does not grow, people lose their jobs. So a straightforward solution to this issue is to redistribute available working hours more equally among people. We can say that work time reduction is necessary for work sharing. Everyone should work less so that everyone can work. But as long as productivity remains a venerated totem, we will keep on falling back into the same dynamic. We should then look beyond, and that means valuing work on the quality and durability of the goods we make rather than how time efficiently. The second tenet of a post-growth economy is that we must transition from industrial production to social and environmental reproduction. The slogan of a post-growth economy should be less commodities, more communities. This means focusing on the maintenance, recycling, repair, and restoration of ecosystems and built infrastructures, as long as education, culture, and care. And this is a propitious moment, as the lockdown has suddenly made us realize that we have been taking an array of everyday chores for granted. Taking care of the children, of the elderly, and the sick forces us to recognize the value of collective arrangements around the care tasks. The COVID-19 pandemic shows that the neoliberal ideal of resilient individuals surviving alone is in fact a privileged illusion that actually shifts the burden onto others. Third tenet of a post-growth economy. We must transition from a system that creates artificial scarcity to one that ensures public abundance. For instance, the interventions that matter when it comes to improving human welfare do not require high levels of GDP. Proof of that is the fact that the European Union as a whole has 36% less income per capita than the United States. And yet, it beats the US not only on life expectancy, but on virtually every indicator of human welfare. And even more strikingly than this is that the Central American country of Costa Rica, just to take an example among many, achieves these objectives with just 1/7 of the GDP per capita of the United States. But what explains such remarkable results? Well, the thing is that when it comes to delivering long, healthy, flourishing lives for all, what counts is investing in high-quality universal public services, which are significantly more cost-efficient to run than their private counterparts. However, since the 1980s, endless waves of privatization have been unleashed all over the world, and social goods everywhere are under attack. This is a purposeful strategy. The idea is that by making public goods artificially scarce, people will have no choice but to purchase private alternatives, meaning that they end up paying to acquire goods that they used to access for free. And what happens when you enclose a good that used to be accessed for free by the people? Well, GDP grows. GDP grows because money changes hands. What happens is that when you enclose public goods, you create artificial scarcity. Hence, as you can see, scarcity and growth create a self-reinforcing loop. To stimulate growth, you need to enclose public goods. And to have the means to access public goods, you need to have growth. But if scarcity is created for the sake of growth, as I've just explained, then by reversing artificial scarcity, we can render economic growth unnecessary. And how can we do that? Well, by de-enclosing and expanding the commons, we can enable people to access goods that they need to live well without needing high levels of income and therefore additional growth. People would be able to work less without any loss to their quality of life, and so producing less unnecessary stuff and generating less pressure on the biosphere. The economy would indeed be smaller in terms of GDP, true, but it would be more abundant in terms of welfare. And that's why expanding universal public services is essential for making a post-growth economy works. The last tenet of a transition that I want to discuss is the need to transform the way we finance the state's budget. For instance, at the moment, it is for the state budget is for a considerable share funded through income taxation that would decline in a context of work time reduction. And so the government must change the way it finances itself. A straightforward solution to this could be to shift taxation away from wages and towards the use of natural resources, the so-called green taxation, which would also have the added benefit of inducing firms to reduce costs by becoming more ecological sustainable, so reducing their use of resources and energy, rather than by improving workers' productivity through automation, for example. But we will probably need also more imaginative alternatives, such as introducing non-monetary taxes based on time. For instance, everyone could be expected to devote time in the provisioning of public services in exchange of the ability to access them for free at the point of use. Every person could gradually begin contributing from their teenage years, for then taking on their social responsibilities fully during adulthood, and finally withdrawing in old age. Their contribution could take either the form of specialization in a certain duty or a rotation of tasks where people learn various skills. Work is the most abundant resource we have, so why not basing the functioning of the welfare state directly on it? So these are the four proposals that I've just discussed, and I understand that to many might seem a political non-starters, but I'd say that what is politically realistic today may have very little to do with what is politically realistic after a few more summers of record-breaking heat waves, uncontrollable forest fires, and droughts. And in the meantime, we should adopt a stance of critical support, embracing the political opening afforded by the Green New Deal, while at the same time contesting some of its specific elements, and in doing so, expanding the horizon of political possibility. To do this, we need a creative experimentation with policies and institutions, but also extra-parliamentary disruptive action from below, for example, taking inspiration from Extinction Rebellion and the global youth climate strikes. So social movements must target political elites and make them feel threatened enough to exercise the state's relative autonomy to capital's short-term prerogatives. But to do this, we need to place the state front and center in our strategic considerations. Therefore, appeals to corporate social responsibility, attempts to shame capital into reform, or strategies that declare politics broken and seek to circumvent the state, or escapist hyperlocalism, are fundamentally unrealistic strategies, in my opinion. I'll conclude by saying that the battles to come have the potential to unleash desires and transform identities. And we will learn, screw up, and learn again. The Green New Deal does not offer a prepackaged solution, but rather it opens up a new terrain of politics. And what I want to say to you is, let's seize it. Thank you very much for your attention.